Hi, everyone. As has been customary over the last year, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. I'm super excited to welcome you to this session titled Representing India on Screen. We have a phenomenal guest in Zoya Akhtar. While Zoya needs no introduction, and this would be a good place to save time and just ask her questions instead
Hello.
of introducing her, I will take a moment to tell you a little bit about Zoya's trajectory and what makes Zoya one of the most important filmmakers in India today. Zoya made her debut about 12 years ago in 2009, her directorial debut. She was in the films prior to that as well, with Luck by Chance. Over the last 12 years, Zoya has made four feature films, written one more in addition to those four, made three short films, and has made a web series, which she currently is shooting the second season for. So we are particularly grateful that Zoya has taken out time to be with us today. Thank you, Zoya, for being here. Typically,
Thank
I
you
would
for
say,
inviting me.
yeah, typically I'd say, we would have loved to have you here in Cambridge, but COVID aside, it also feels like minus 10 degrees Celsius here today. So I'm sure you're happier and warmer wherever you are.
I'm in Delhi. I'm in a hotel room in Delhi, and we're shooting Made in Heaven season 2. Yeah, it's not as cold, so it's good.
Great. So let's get started. I have a lot of questions for you. Let's just start more generally. So your father's legacy has been, enduring legacy has been to represent the angry young man, against the larger social backdrop of the 1970s. Your brother's legacy, even though it's a career in progress, was to represent the post-liberalization Indian middle class, both in Dil Chahta Hai and Laksh. Based on your career thus far, how do you think your films have engaged with the zeitgeist, and what do you think is the underlying theme of Zoya Akhtar's filmography? I have an answer to this as an audience, but I want to know, what do you think?
I'm very curious as to what your answer is because I look back now and with my little body of work, and I think I just tend to coming of age films. I mean, all my protagonists, whatever their ages, seem to come of age, and they're very character driven. They're very in search of authenticity, in search of personal authenticity, and I think that's what the theme has been for me.
Right
Like,
now, I'm a policy person, so the way I was going to frame pretty much what you were saying is that I think the underlying theme is probably aspiration and identity, and the obstacle.
identity, I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, and I
Yeah.
think there's been an evolution in your films, I'd say, in the way you represent identity, from the most intimate in terms of individual desires and, how you make it in an industry like from Luck by Chance to family. And then now, exploring class and caste in greater detail later on in your films, which is a trajectory I want to get into. So I want to, go through film by film and ask you questions about not just the making of those movies, but also your opinions, in terms of the milieu you were exploring there. So let's start with Luck by Chance. I think in many ways, Luck by Chance, it's an almost meta way of looking at your career. When it released, it received nearly universal acclaim from critics, but it did not do well commercially, which is also the way I see that genre of films in the film industry at that time. But Luck by Chance also released around the same time when there was actually a change happening in the industry with, alongside films like Dev D, Ishqiya, Band Baja Barat, all around the 2009-10 period. What are some of the big changes you witnessed in the Hindi film industry over the past, 10 or 12 years? And how has this made you adapt your approach?
I mean, I think the biggest, the corporates had already come in. The corporate culture was already in the film industry. Before that, like when we talk about the world in Luck by Chance, which is the producer Romy Rowley's world, they were all independent producers, and there were this bunch of families that were producing films, and that kind of grew. And it was considered a high risk business. So banks enroll you. There weren't any business houses. So when it became an industry, that changed. When the government made it an industry, that changed. That was a big change, and that was like just before I started to make films. But I think the biggest thing that's happened since I made films is there've been way more screens that have come in. Way more screens have allowed for way more films to get made because they need content to, we need cinema to show. And what happens is there are only that many saleable stars. So you have to compete with saleable stars. And when you have to compete with saleable stars, you have to now tell stories that are edgier, stories that don't necessarily need big ticket film stars to be interesting. So the content started changing in that sense, and that became really interesting. The OTT platforms came in. That started slowly changing the palette of the audience. You also had access to global stories that people started watching. So that slowly started changing the taste. And it's still an evolution. I don't know which way it's going to go, but right now is a great time to be in
Right.
film.
Yeah, and we've been hearing that for a couple of years now, right? And that obviously means it's been sustained over the past couple of years. But let's go back a little into Luck by Chance. I think you poke fun in a very nice way at the film industry's way of functioning. You also just talked about a lot of family production houses, which obviously hasn't changed that much. And I know you've talked about nepotism stuff elsewhere, so I don't want to get into that. I do want to get to the flip side of that, though. How does the Hindi film industry define quality? Like, what is quality in Indian cinema? For instance, I mean, this is a market where people are happy to watch a Salman Khan poster for 3 hours. This is also a market where your awards really don't necessarily reflect quality. So, what are the benchmarks that the film industry works towards?
I mean, I think like any business, the number one thing in it is box office.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that.
Right.
It functions on box office, and that's the biggest thing it functions on. But having said that, there is nobody, I think, that's really talented and on some level been a people's person. You don't work alone in the film industry. It's a very collaborative art, and it's a very it's you need endurance. You can't be a filmmaker if you don't love it. You can't be in this business if you don't love it. It's very hard work, and you are like when you're shooting. You have a 16 to 18-hour day every day for months, and you're with that crew, which is about 200 people, 250 people, day in and day out, and you have to be able to find a way to get on. So if you have an ability to get on with people and you are talented, there is no way you're not going to. There is no way, So there is a sense. I mean, and I think, like, take my first film. It made no money at all, but I won Best Debut. I was nominated everywhere. I had actors wanting to work with me. My second film, it took me 7 years to make my first film. I made my second film. My film released in 2009. In 2010, I shot Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. It was that quick.
Right.
And it was quick because the industry liked my work. So whether I made money or no, they were like, okay, she seems to know what she's doing, and they bet on me. So it's different. We do have the national awards that does tend to award excellence, and it's pan India, which is really nice actually, because we have many film industries in the country. It's not just the Hindi film industry, which is Mumbai. It's across the board. I mean, Calcutta, the South has 4 film industries. UP has an industry, so it's all over. So the national awards is one good marker, and the thing is, if you're good, you definitely have your audience.
Yeah.
Whether you get an award or no, you have an audience. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me actually, pull from something you just said. The Hindi film industry is not the only film industry in India, but I think there's been an impression that the Hindi film industry has perhaps, at least in conversation, day-to-day conversations, has cannibalized other film industries, or is insular and doesn't engage as much as other film industries. I know there has been a trend to start promoting more regional cinema as well. Especially with producers taking on things like Bahubali and so on, even from distributing that. What do you see as the relationship between the Hindi film industry and some of the other regional film industries?
The relationship is there have been a lot of crossover artists,
right? Yeah,
whether they're actors, whether they're filmmakers, the technical crews constantly working with each other, constantly. Like we work with technicians from the South all the time because they are really good. And I mean musicians, I mean editors, I mean cinematographers, all of them. They work in and out. They're crossing all borders, the technical crew. But even actors have kind of crossed over. Filmmakers have worked. I mean, Mani Ratnam has worked here. Rituparna Ghosh had worked here. So Aparna Sen works in Bombay. So it's that people have moved up and down. But the thing is, it's very audience dictated. That's what it is. It's like, where are your tickets selling?
Mhm.
And where are your tickets I mean, Bahubali is that massive tentpole.
Yeah.
It's a fantastical film. It's something that you want to watch. It's a spectacle.
Right.
And it's also a very Indian in its ethos. So therefore, it kind of translates. But sometimes when things are very specific to a particular community or culture and with a language, they tend to stay within that zone.
Right.
Also, I don't know if a lot of people like to read subtitles. So I think it doesn't work out that well, in that way. But I think it's getting better now.
Yeah.
It's definitely getting better. Yeah.
That reminds me of something Bong Joon-ho said, while winning an award last year, which was, if we can just get past and read the bottom third of a screen, we'd be exposed to so many better films.
Yeah.
So, you talked about Zindagi. I want to move to, Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara now. Clearly, like you said, everyone wanted to work with you after having seen the quality of your first film. But here's Zindagi, which is both critically and commercially successful, does really well. But this was also, at some moment in time, you started shunning the label of being a woman director, or a woman director, as the label goes. So Hollywood filmmaker Ava DuVernay, who's made films like Selma and the miniseries When They See Us, recently said, or has said in various forums actually, that she didn't want to be the social justice girl, and pretty much every movie or every script about slavery went to her. And it's only recently that she's begun to embrace that, that's the kind of movie she needs to make. What is, have you basically seen the woman director tag to be restrictive in some way? Is there a perception that the industry, throws with it? Is there a perception that the media has about what a female director should do?
No, I mean, like, when you take the example of Ava DuVernay, who's just amazing, making films that have a social justice theme is a choice. It may be a subconscious choice, but it's a choice she's making.
Right.
I mean, me being a female filmmaker is not a choice. I find it really strange when people keep referring to my gender. I don't understand what it means. We don't say female dentist and female teacher and female, So I don't understand why you have to keep referring to my gender. It doesn't really affect my choices because I'm going to follow the story that interests me.
Yeah.
Because it takes 2 or 3 years of my time to invest in it. So, so whatever interests me, I'm going to make. And I'm not going to be told that I should do this because I'm a woman, or I shouldn't do that because I'm not a man. I mean, I'm going to make what I want.
Let me, I guess, give you one reason why that might come up. So, research from around the world finds that in 2019, only 12% of the top 100 films in terms of box office grosses around the world were made by women. And 2019 was actually an aberration because, typically it's even lower than 8% of, the top movies being made by women. So there's clearly, a deficit of women making movies with big budgets. Why do you think the representation of women in such roles has been limited? And, given that you're also surrounded by an ecosystem of female directors, whether it's Reema Kakti, Nitya Mehra, Lankrita Srivastav, how do you see your role, your collective role, perhaps, in terms of addressing this gap and improving representation, not just of women, but also, other marginalized groups, both on and off screen?
See, the thing is, firstly, I think women came onto the scene much later, in every field in India. So we have a lot of catching up to do because women weren't in the playing field. So we came in much, much later. And there were the oddities, I mean, there were Sai Prajpay before that, films and stuff like that. But it's happened now that people are telling these stories, people are wanting to hear their stories, people want to know their point of view. And every year that number is increasing, as it must. And it's got an audience and people are interested and it must increase. There is, I have a lot of friends that are directors, women directors, a lot of friends. And we tend to write each other's material and work with each other and grow that collective on a level because A, it's fun, B, we are friends, C, you can tell stories and more nuanced stories that people may not get, people may not I mean, it's personal. So
Mhm.
it's things that you can put out there in a way that have not been addressed or people don't know how to address. So I like working with women. I like my female characters. I like my female directors, and in my capacity, whatever I can do to give that a platform and to push that, I will. But having said that, I still uh, don't want. I want there to be a time where it's just not addressed. Yeah, she's a filmmaker, and that's it.
Do you see that happening in your lifetime?
Of course,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So
We
let
make.
me ask you the
Yeah.
other side of that. Of the representation of women on screen. I think the film industry gets flack for a lot of different things. I think the one thing that we haven't talked about as much is actually a success in the last decade in terms of more women headlining films, and not just headlining. I mean, from the start of the decade you had Vidya Balan. Later on, you've had Alia Bhatt. You've also had people like Deepika Padukone, Anushka Sharma become producers. What do you think is driving some of this change? Is it just the same yearning for the audience to actually watch new characters, watch new stories?
Absolutely, because you have a platform where you can tell stories. You have multiple platforms now. Also, the actresses of this generation are different. They
Yeah.
want longer careers. They want longevity. They love film. They love
Mm.
cinema. And they want to stay in that longer. They want to not just work in your story. They want to tell their own stories. Whether they're producing it or not, it's also an amazing business decision.
Mhm.
They are in a place to platform other filmmakers. Like Anushka is making really, really good work,
Yeah.
and yeah, and she's introducing new filmmakers. She's telling different kinds of stories. She has very strong female characters. So why shouldn't she do it? I'm so happy she's there doing it. Yeah. So I mean, it's a great time. I think everyone's just charged. I
Right.
think everyone's just charged because they have the opportunity. You
Mhm.
know.
But do you
Yeah.
think do you think they get the same budgets, that some of the, I'm not even talking about the mainstream, the big heroes who've been around for 20, 30 years. Do they get the same budgets as, their contemporaries, their male contemporaries would get?
To make their own film starring them?
Yeah.
Depends. I don't. It depends. Like say a Padmavati,
Yeah.
a Padmavat,
Yeah.
which was Deepika headlined. Of course, it has Ranveer and Shahid in it,
Right.
but that was a massive budget film. You
Right.
know, so it really depends on the project, the whole project.
Right.
But most films with male stars, not all, but most films with male stars, tend to make more money.
Mhm.
The audience tends to. I mean, we are in a
Right.
patriarchal society where the hero's been leading.
Mhm.
So when that makes more, it's just business. The minute it depends, it's just directly in proportion to return.
Mhm.
You know, that's just it.
Got it. So let's go from the high return film of Zindagi to your following film, Dil Dhadakne Do, which did well, but perhaps did not get the response that your previous films had gotten, both critically and commercially. But I have to say, I haven't met a single person who I know who did not like the film. So I think a lot of the criticism or the critical response just seems a little strange to a lot of us. But that aside,
Mm.
uh, you know this is also a question that Mahir Kapoor, one of our attendees, who says they're a budding screenwriter, also has. But all of your films reveal that you're a very keen observer of human behavior. I was saying this earlier. Most Bollywood movies are unable to give us even one fully fleshed out character. You've given us multiple. I think across your filmography, there are only two characters that I thought were not completely written. But I think in general, I mean, you've given us characters, their motivations, their interests, the obstacles they face. Where does this interest in understanding human behavior come from? And how do you build your characters? Where do you start?
Like I think I'm a big people's person. I really enjoy people. I
Yeah.
like hanging with people. I like different kinds of people. I like different kinds of characters. I'm very interested in human behavior. I was a student of literature, and I studied literature and sociology. And I think a combination, before I did film, so a combination of that
Hmm.
has really helped me in developing a world and a milieu. Literature gives you, I mean, firstly, it gets you to read. You read
Yeah.
everything that's out there. You have an entire gamut of characters to pick from, and characteristics and conflicts, and it gives you material, fodder, a world that you can take and adapt from. My writing partner, Rima Kakti, who's also a filmmaker, is a literature student herself and a psychology student. So I think the combination of it all works well together. I don't really like the binary of good and bad, and the villain and the hero.
Yeah.
And I think it works in certain narratives. Like I like superhero narratives and stuff,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work regularly. It's just weird and it's boring.
Yeah.
And I don't know people like that, and I'm not like that. And I think we all like kind of live in a shade of gray, and it's just more interesting. It's just more fragile, and it's people that are a bit flawed are just nicer for me to watch, and
Yeah.
I like make what I want to watch.
Yeah, let's dive a little into that, right? Because I think one of the other things I see is you give every character a chance at redemption. And one of the more interesting things, one of the interesting places that I saw that was, and we haven't talked about Gully Boy just yet, but I do want to, bring this in, is that you even gave Murad's father's character the chance to redeem himself. A couple of scenes after you show him, hitting his wife. Is there, is there a character you think, or a character trait that you think is irredeemable? Or like a place where you wouldn't want to tie that up with a bow at the end of a movie.
Yeah. I just haven't made films about those kind of people yet.
Okay.
But there are definitely people that are irredeemable.
Right.
I just haven't made a film about someone like that yet.
But you find yourself interested in trying to understand what causes that, even in that kind of character.
Yeah, of course. What causes that? I mean, I'm not going to say it's okay. I'm not going to say it can be fixed. But it's good to know what is leading to that, so that you may help prevent it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. But there are people that are evil, and that's not redeemable. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and getting into that, I also think in many ways Dil Dhadakne Do was some kind of inflection point in your career. I think before that, you were telling us stories about people. You were telling us stories about individual constraints that were imposed on them and so on. But I think I don't mean you went to a darker place in a bad way, but you went to a more a larger social setting, social obstacles, deeper norms that needed to be fixed. I mean, right, not just in your films, but also your two short films, as well as your initial two short films, as well as your web series. You've touched issues like feminism, class, caste, interfaith marriages, LGBTQ representation, much more explicitly than you did previously. What was this a conscious choice to make this transition, or were you just more confident as a filmmaker, or were these always stories you wanted to tell?
They're always stories I wanted to tell. I have many stories I want, and you don't want to keep doing the same thing. You don't want to tell the same story because A, you've done it and it's boring, and B, there's just so much. I mean, I'm surrounded by so much that you need to explore, and you need to talk about, and you need to share, and you need to platform, and you need to there's so many things that come up and are like, oh my god, this is something people should know, or this is something that's going to be fun to do, or whatever the reason for it is. But I want to keep doing that. I want to keep pushing it, and I want to get out of my comfort zone. I want to, one thing is what you're interested in and what moves you. And the other thing is, how can your craft be expanded to tell that story that's actually not your truth, in a way. So it's a bit of both. And it's very exciting,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were conscious choices and also choices that moved my heart, stories that touch me.
Right. But in a country as diverse as India in terms of its socioeconomics, how do you make sure you tell these stories while remaining conscious of those of those diversities and the differing opinions? So many real challenges that crop up even after a movie releases.
Yeah. No, but I think people somewhere can read intention. They can see intention, and they can read intention, and they know what you're trying to do. And if you're trying to do something that stirs a hornet's nest, they know it. If you're trying to offend, they'll pick it up. But I think if they see your intention and they know the place you're coming from and what you're trying to say, most people are okay. And the thing is, you are living in India. So I've grown up here. And I've grown up in this like rich diversity in terms of all these communities. And especially when you're a Mumbai kid, because it's kind of like New York, everybody from every state is there. So you don't grow up in like one particular community. You grow up with everybody. You go to everyone's homes. You've heard every language. You've eaten all the cuisine. And that's how you've been brought up. So you do have an understanding of it anyway. Then you are living in a city like that where the socioeconomic strata is in your face. The difference in it. So you meet the really privileged people, you meet the people that are not really privileged because they come home and they're your staff. So you have that connect. You're not in a bubble. And so it's...
Is that just you? You say it's a Bombay thing. Is that just you? Because I mean, a lot of people, talk about how people in Bombay can be very insular, or Bombay as a city can be very insular and, doesn't engage with, anything beyond Bombay? Or is it just you that that's engaging with people?
I think people engage. I think Bombay is a really good throbbing city and people are really good. It's Mumbai is like, I love that city, and it's home, and it becomes home. People come in here from anywhere. Most of my friends are people that have come to Mumbai, and it's now home. Like it adopts you and holds you close, and and it gives you sustenance, and it's very addictive. So no.
We'll get to your ode to Bombay in Gully Boy in a moment, but before that, I've also seen you push the boundaries much more in the content you've created for platforms than your films. What is the underlying economics that makes you do that?
There are a couple of things. One is there is a particular audience that's on the OTT, which is not just your evolved. When I say evolved, I mean when I mean evolved, I mean cinema evolved.
Right.
They've watched a lot more kind of stories. They've watched a lot more global stories than your only Hindi movie janta. These people are there. They are on global platforms and they're watching stories from all over the world.
Right.
So there is that. B, you come in there, you do not have the pressure of box office. So you can risk it, on a level. You don't have that opening weekend. This is the lifespan of something that you make for an OTT platform is very different. And it can pick up and it can lie there. And, 2 years later, somebody can be like, have you seen that? And you can go there and watch it. So it's got a completely different life. And it's got a completely different, the graph.
Yeah.
It's different. And the third thing is you're not dealing with censorship. So so you
might change soon, unfortunately.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think it'll change?
No, I don't think so. How can they can't just censor Indian filmmakers.
In at least domestically in India. Okay, so it's not about releasing necessarily on the platform in India. You're talking about releasing on these platforms globally as well. Because I know there's been talk recently about certifying content on platforms in India at least.
Certifying content is not a problem because you should tell people if it's an adult,
right.
If it's it's not for children. You should tell people it's not for children. You don't want your kids watching that, so you should tell people that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Certification is not a problem. Censorship is a problem.
But certification has
telling adults what to watch, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Certification is good. Certification is required, but not telling adults what to do. That's kind of weird.
But certification in India over time has basically become censorship, right? It's the certification board that pretty much has started censoring too.
It has been censorship, but I think, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
Though I don't know how they'll do it on OTT platforms because it's you're going to censor everyove on the platform. You can't just censor us. Also, we are now, you have filmmakers competing on a global level.
Right.
Say, Love Stories got nominated for an Emmy. Delhi Crime won India its first Emmy.
Yeah.
Those are stories that need to be told in the way they're being told. So if you start censoring that, then you are tying the filmmakers' hands and you are not going to allow growth.
Yeah.
Because right now we are we're talking to a world audience,
That's
and
right.
we need to be able to speak that language and have that syntax.
Yeah. So let's talk about the world audience. Let's move on to Gully Boy, which premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, was India's official entry to the Oscars, and you spent some time engaging this international audience while doing that. And I really see Gully Boy for multiple reasons as really closing the circle on your career, or make showing that you came full circle. Because you started off, in New York, you started off, on international projects. Uh, while engaging this international audience, while you were, campaigning for Gully Boy or showing Gully Boy to, to this wider audience, what did you find? What was the reaction to the film? But also, what were perceptions about Hindi cinema among this global audience?
I mean, the general perception of Hindi cinema with a global audience that doesn't know really anything about it, that they've seen it, is like they're all musicals,
Right.
they're all song and dance,
Yeah.
they're pitched very high,
Yeah.
they're slightly melodramatic. I mean, those are the kind of perceptions that you get. But having said that, a lot of people want to watch it just for that reason. So, really, really fun
Yeah.
for me. And Gully Boy did really well. And yeah, it like opened a lot of doors. I met a lot of people. It was received really well. I mean, people were good, they were good to the film,
Mhm.
and it opened in Berlin actually. And yeah, it reviewed well. It was yeah. So I mean, I have no complaints.
What
And
do you think it is about the movie that touched that chord? Like, that allowed it to, it wasn't your standard song and dance movie at a high pitch.
firstly, it's a universal story.
Mm.
Again, it's on one level a rags to riches story. On the other level, it's got familiar things because it's a rags to riches, coming of age, hip hop, which is also like a genre most people get. Uh, 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 and hip hop is basically like scavenger music.
Mhm.
You don't need money. You don't need to be in a big studio to make it. You can, rip a beat off YouTube and
Right.
or the internet and actually spit to it, and you can make music. And that's why it's come from the streets, because it didn't need a lot of money. It just needed a voice, and it needed people to be able to tell their own stories, in a particular way, and people started doing it. So that is kind of has been common to a lot of places.
Mm.
And so those were the commonalities. And at the same time, it was, oh my God, it's rappers from Asia's largest slum, you
Yeah.
know? So that was different. And it
Right.
was like rappers from Mumbai. And that was different. And here was also like the Muslim community in a ghetto in Mumbai. So there were, so there were things that were familiar enough for you to be like, I can get it, and
Right.
different enough to be interested and want to get it. So I think that's the kind of combination that made it interesting for people.
Right. Given that, so I mean, very often the conversation in India is nominee for the best international feature, the best foreign language film. But why is it that we aren't thinking at the scale of, say, Roma, or a Parasite? Why hasn't, I mean, I know those are more recent phenomenons, but even people like Ang Lee or Alfonso Cuarón are not recent phenomenons. Why
Yeah.
has India produced some of these global films, not just the international film category film?
I mean, the thing is, these films are not about scale. When you say,
Yeah.
they're actually pretty small films
Right.
that blew up.
Yeah.
So the problem is not that. I have a feeling the Indian film audience is massive.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not just South Asia; it's massive. It's the Middle East, places in Australia, certain countries in Europe, Japan. I mean, obviously the UK. So the diaspora is massive, and it's also permeated into different in Africa. Countries in Africa. It's got a huge audience. What happens is, so it kind of is self-contained, and the producers are like, this is it. We have our audience. We are making our films. We are happy doing it, and there's been no need to actually come out of that comfort zone on a level. But having said that, Satyajit Ray did.
That was the aberration, right?
Adur Gopalakrishnan, Shekhar Kapoor, or Meera Nair. I mean, see, it's not like there hasn't been anybody,
Right.
Now you will start seeing a difference,
Hmm.
because I think the platforms are there, the audience is there, and it's going to be. You can see the world's just getting smaller,
Right.
and it's going to matter. Like, okay, so my audience was, let me see if I can, penetrate the hinterland of India. Let me see if I
Hmm.
can grow the audience there. But now it's going to be like, let me see if I can grow the audience outside.
Right.
So it's definitely happening.
Mhm.
Slowly,
But
slowly.
here's the other thing, right? It's also not just about telling Indian stories. If you look at, Ritesh Batra, for instance, he started with the Lunchbox, but now he's making films globally. Would we ever see Zoya Akhtar, make a film in a different country or in a different setting?
Yes, of course. That's the
And
plan. I hope so.
what would that take?
I'd love to. I mean, it would take a story that needs me, and a story that I emotionally resonate with, and I can tell.
Right.
I think it makes no sense to not do that, because I mean, that's the fun.
Yeah.
And see, cultures are different, and those can be studied, and those can be, you can be guided in it. The human story, the humanity of the story has to connect across the board.
Right.
I mean, I can watch a film like Beasts of No Nation and like my heart breaks. So I mean, it's completely different from my life, and that's the point. The humanity has to get to you. So I definitely want to tell stories in another culture, and of another culture, and find that common ground, and find that common human experience.
Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting you talk about platforms creating that opportunity to, reach a global audience, because one of the things that I've seen in the last decade and a half is, the role of film festivals. I mean, whether you look at even the Lunchbox becoming bigger and bigger by each film festival, or even actually Chaitanya Tamhane is The Disciple, but
Yes.
also pretty much everything, Guneet Monga and her team have been producing, I mean, they've just, been making their way through the festivals. What do you see as the role of the festivals in bringing you that global audience? What is the process? Tell us a little bit about, what happens backstage to get your film to one of those platforms.
I
And I
mean,
mean, a festival platform.
festivals are the best.
Yeah.
They're just the best. I mean, because it's like a cinema carnival. It's like people coming together. It's movies from everywhere, filmmakers from everywhere. And when I say filmmakers, I just don't mean directors. It's people that make movies, producers, writers, cinematographers, people coming together, and you just get a chance to interact with, to talk to see, to be around, and just exchange ideas, exchange contacts, exchange notes, feedback. I mean, it's exhilarating. You meet people, you go in for talks, and it's just very, very exciting. Having said that, I mean, also it's a market, so you can sell your film there. There's sales agents, there's all that going on parallelly, the business, the market side of it. But there's a sense of, if you get a film in there and it catches a buzz, which say a Lunchbox did or whatever, it's really exciting, because that takes you, you may find distribution, it may release in a small way, it may come and it may go, but a festival buzz really pushes it. It really pushes it, so you can get on a roll, and that's what takes you places and gets picked up in a bigger way. And then if there's a buzz, then a studio will market it in a particular way, they'll push it for the award. So I mean, there's only win being in a festival. Yeah,
that's great. So I actually, so the other thing I said, in the other way in which, I think Gully Boy helped you come a full circle was, you've often talked about how Salam Bombay, which is another Bombay film, was one of your biggest inspirations and made you actually want to start making films. And then, you make this almost 30 years and a couple of months after Salam Bombay. And this is also, quite, a divergence from your previous films in terms of the syntax and the milieu you're talking about here. The writer Philip Roth, was once asked, how much he draws from his personal life, and he was like, I can't start anywhere else. I have to start with my personal life. Yeah. It's really about rubbing two sticks of reality together to get a fire of realities. Something he said. Now, this has been very evident in your initial movies. It was your milieu, even if the characters were different. It was generally, your strata of society, your milieu. You could understand the motivations. Tell me how Gully Boy is different. I mean, because we've often talk about how Slumdog Millionaire was a foreigner's gaze into the slums. How do you make sure Gully Boy wasn't, a Bandra or Juhu gaze into Dharavi, but actually, a story that was Dharavi's.
I mean, it's not like I've ever lived in Dharavi or whatever, but it's my city.
Yeah.
And I know it.
Yeah.
You know, I know it. I may not know it like someone that lives there.
What do you mean by that, though? I mean, when you say you know it, I mean, how do you see? Ultimately, how do you prevent this from looking like poverty porn, for instance, or you're just showing poor people on a screen, or you're being reductionist
But
about
you're
how
not
you.
just showing poor people, you're showing people.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, everyone keeps saying like, you did portraits of poor people. And I'm like, they're people. It's a
Yeah.
music video being shot in a ghetto, and they're people that live there. And if you're looking at them and all you're seeing is poverty,
Yeah.
then dude, something's up with your gaze, because they're human beings.
Right.
They're people and they're there. And why would I shoot them any differently from I'm shooting Ranveer?
Yeah.
Like, so it's, I think it's your intent.
Mhm.
I think it's what you intend to do with it. I mean, am I showing you a community of
Mhm.
people that live together, and this is the money they have and this is how they live? Or am I showing you, oh my God, look, he's poor?
Mm.
It's your intention, and it'll come through.
Yeah.
It will
So
come
actually,
through.
I want to know a little more about that process, which you translate that intent into what we eventually see on the screen. So walk us through, I guess, perhaps, pick a character in Gully Boy, whether it's Safina, Murad, or actually let's pick Murad's mother. How do you, try to, how do you build that character?
How do I build that character? I mean, in the sense, what do I want from her? Who is she? What is she? I mean, she must have gotten married really early. She's never worked in her life. She's learned how to cook. That's her skill. She cooks. Makes tiffins for people. It gets her extra pocket money. She's had 2 kids. She's married to a man. I mean, they're from a minority community. She's married to a man who's had a hard life, who's had a hard time, has gotten a job. He is extremely subservient to the world and to where he works. And he comes home and he's the king of the jungle in the house. And she doesn't have much of a choice. She's got these 2 sons she's extremely close to. And she's somebody who is, not going to leave because it's not the culture she's from.
Right.
She won't be happy, but it's not something. And there's a lack of. She's not fiscally independent, really. She can try, but she's not empowered in that way. And she also somehow sympathizes with her husband in a weird way.
Yeah, but so here's my thing. I feel like you're underselling what you did in Gully Boy by making it sound so general right now, because the way you're describing it right now could be you describing a poor person in any other part of the country, or a person of that kind in any other part of the country. But I think what really set Gully Boy apart was that you also got into the specificity of that space. It wasn't just any person with the same motivations that you just highlighted. So what I'm trying to understand is, apart from these general character sketches that you just walked us through, how do you also try to understand the specifics so that it's not reductive?
The thing is, it depends on your story. There's no general thing. It's like, what do you want out of the story? I want the boy to be a feminist, even though he's not aware that he is a feminist. You know what I'm saying? I want him to. So I need him to have a very deep bond with this woman. And I want him to have. So it's like, what do you want out of the story? You want him to be able to be protective. He goes from boy to man with his father because of his mother. It's specific to that. What do you want out of it? And therefore, the characters will behave that way. They'll take you there themselves, in terms of behavior. And so I don't. You just start working it, and then within the scene, they just behave. They find their own life. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay. Okay.
You
so
just have a sense of what you want, and then they find their own space.
Right.
Like when you meet her brother, and her brother's made it, and he won't support her to leave because he's conservative, and in front of the brother, she almost feels sorry for her husband because the brother talks down to him. So she's not a victim, and she hates her husband. She hates her husband for what he's done, but she also sees him.
Yeah.
She also feels shitty for him, So I feel like she's a complete person,
Mhm.
Like she's, lost her dignity somewhere, but she's still, keeping it up. Like there's struggle there. And I think that comes out of, you create a character, and then when you put them in circumstances, they find their own behavior.
Mhm.
Like I don't decide everything initially. Yeah.
How does your sociology background help you, make sense of milieus like this?
It helps me approach a milieu and create a world,
Right.
you know, as to what the community is, what would their income be, who are they, what is their activity with each other, what are the interpersonal relationships, what are
Mm.
the morality codes within that community. Even if it doesn't come onto film, when it's your base, your
Right.
characters act accordingly. We don't have to
Mm.
tell you, but their behavior just defines that, you
Right.
know. Yeah, so what are their stresses? How are women treated? Stuff like that. Those things have really helped me. Whether it was a Dil Dharakne Do,
Yeah.
whether it was Luck by Chance, or whether it was Gully Boy. They're
Do
three
you
different worlds.
and do your actors know their character's entire history, or is that just something
Yeah,
you
I do. I tend to write backstories for them.
do? Okay.
Yeah, I write backstories for them, and I write things that are not in the film
Right.
or will not come into the film, but it forms their base, it forms their psychology, and then
Right.
they add to it because I've been very lucky and privileged to work with very good actors. So they come in with the process, so they add to it, and then that becomes really rich.
Got it. So we have limited time. I'm going to ask you one final question, then bring in some questions from our Q&A. So you recently launched Tiger Baby Films. So you're not now you not, don't only make movies and control the narrative and the script, but you also control the purse strings.
Yeah.
What was the motivation behind setting up Tiger Baby? And your website says, stories are what make us. They have the power to shape our lives and change our narratives. Stories can invoke inspiration, build bridges, and shift consciousness. What are the stories you hope to be able to tell through Tiger Baby?
I mean, the thing is, starting Tiger Baby was a natural progression. With our careers, it's a career decision because you want to own your work, so you got to produce it, and B, we are now at a stage where we can actually platform exactly the kind of stories we want to tell and enable other storytellers and enable other people to make films that we think should be made and stories that should be told. I'm very, very interested in urban India. I'm very interested in India, actually, but I want to tell stories out of Tiger Baby and narratives that would resonate with a larger audience, with a global audience. I want to tell stories with a female gaze. I'm very interested in the LGBT space. I'm very interested in I don't know. Just things that move us. Things that move us, and they necessarily may not be completely commercial or a pan India kind of narrative, but it'll find its audience.
Right. That's great. So I'm going to transition to some questions. I could ask you a couple of follow-up questions on that, but I do want to bring in some other questions here. I'm going to ask you one that we've talked about. This is from Rahul Srinivasan at the World Bank. Do Twitter trolls bother you? And do you think filmmakers are averse to riskier themes that might offend communities?
I'm not on Twitter. I find it incredibly toxic, and there's no need for that kind of energy in my life. So I've never been on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, and the trolls don't bother me because I don't ever see them. But besides that, I mean, yeah, I think people are. People are conscious of not offending others. People are conscious. Yes.
So Aditi Ramesh asks, how do you translate the internal dysfunction or turmoil of your characters with subtlety without it seeming like it was something enacted? For instance, Kabir in Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara or Neelam Mehra in Dil Dharakne Do, which I think was my favorite character in that movie, Shafali Shah's character, because I just thought there was a backstory which everyone could tell, even though you weren't telling us the backstory.
Yeah. No, I think, you have some very, like, you just layer it. I don't think everything needs to be said. I think you just layer it. I think you just layer her insecurity. You just layer her anger towards her husband. You layer his vanity, It's just like when you see them in the mirror and he doesn't even look at her, and it's their anniversary and she's all dolled up and he checks himself out and moves on. I mean, it just tells you everything there. The minute you see him talking to another woman, she's like gone. We never needed to see that he's had an affair before. There's a whole history there when she eats that cake, when she eats that pastry in the mirror. So I think you just need to layer it, and then you just need slamming actors, that just make you feel it. That's what you need. You just need to layer it. Everything needn't be said and in your face and on the nose, and you know.
Mhm. So Urmi Samadar has a question. As a filmmaker, are there structural changes you may want to see in your industry in terms of performance measures, policies, business models, etc.? Which is also similar to another question we have from Nadeem Akhtar, who asks, what are the kind of changes you want to see 20 years from now in terms of technology, storytelling, budget?
I mean, definitely, you want to see a growth. Firstly, before the budgets can increase, there has to be a return growth. So you want to see that growth, and for that growth, we need way more screens. We want more screens to come up in India. We want different kinds of screens so that everything is not so expensive and it's more affordable for people, and more films can be told and more. Exhibited, and mostly we need screens. We need a pipeline to enable our films to reach a more global audience. We need to figure that distribution and pipeline out. And I think once you grow that, everything else will fall into place.
So this is a question I'm also very interested in. Shashank Gola asks, who are your favorite filmmakers in India? Who is a filmmaker that the general audience probably does not know but should watch out for?
I think currently my two favorite filmmakers are Nagraj Manjule. He made Sairat and Fandri. These are the two films. Fandri, I think, is on Netflix or Prime. You can watch it. And Chaitanya Tamane.
Right. Okay. And you've also been
currently my favorites. Please watch them, huh?
And you've also been saying really good things about Ibaleu, which is now finally on Netflix.
Oh my God, I love that movie. Yeah, Ibaleu. Please watch it. Yeah, it's very, very good.
And who's your favorite character from your movies? This is a question from before I make it sound as Mike. It's from Sanjana.
They're all mine. They're all like mine. So I don't know if I have favorites like that, but I think right now, because it's it's been close, I'll take Safina.
I thought I was going to say, let's say not Safina, but that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is the last question I'm going to ask you. I think one of the things that's very evident both from your interviews but also from your films is that there's no one aspect of your filmmaking that you're partial to. You don't. I think what really comes across is that you create a team of people, you give everyone a lot of credit, and you hire experts in every role. Your films have great cinematography, they have great music, they have great writing, and and that's something I think all your films show. And you also give credit to all of these different players that you work with.
Because collaborative. It is a collaborative art. I'm not doing this alone. And if I change one major component, the film would be different.
Right.
I work with really, really talented artists, and A, they make my work better. They make me look really good. And B, I have fun. I enjoy that process of co-creating something, and I think if you want to have that, and I think if you want to grow, you have to realize it's a collective. And to realize it's a collective, you have to be able to give them ownership on the work, because when they feel it's theirs, they are more present and they own it, and as they should, because they're contributing. And I enjoy that. I work with a lot of my friends. I like it, and I think I don't do this alone, and I need to share that because that's the truth.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. And
it's interesting you say that, because Tina Fey said some years ago that what I realized is that I can work with my friends and also be their boss, which is great. And so actually, this is my last question. I lied there. So we're a bunch of students at the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy and the Harvard Business School that are running this conference. What is one thing about the world that you think we as students of these institutions should be keeping in mind as we go out into the world and work in the future?
I think whatever you do and whatever field you get into, and whatever you end up doing, and I hope you're all brilliant and you will all do well, probably. I mean, just be aware that we need kindness, I think. I think the world just needs to be kinder. And I think people that are educated and people are out there and people that are going to be successful, as 90% of you will be.
Hopefully.
Um, yeah, I think if you can enable uh, people around you to be kinder, just create a culture of kindness around you. I think that's what the world needs.
Great, Zoya Akhtar. Thank you so much. That's a really positive note to end on. Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
for having me here. Yeah.
Looking forward to all of your future movies and the next season of Made in Heaven.